Yeah, I think the main role of the game designer is to, of course, guide the design, the whole design process. So the game designer is usually responsible of the core concept of the game. So basically what that means in practice is usually collect the ideas from the team or the stakeholders, document all the key features of the game, and usually game designer is the one that very heavily focuses on the fun aspect of the game. So whether the gameplay is actually going to be like it's desired to be. So that's how I see the role of the game designer, and that's mainly the entertainment games. But from the serious games point of view, usually I think all of these are the same, but in addition, the serious game designer usually is the one who thinks how to integrate the substance matter, like whatever the topic of the serious game is, how to integrate the substance matter into the game design and how to make the gameplay actually fulfill the requirements of the serious game. And usually that means balancing the fun factors with the utility factors. So if you think serious game as a tool that tries to achieve something, so that's kind of balancing the fun and the toolness of the game in a way that it makes perfect end user experience. Yeah, I think usually entertainment game designer, he or she needs to understand the medium, so what games are and what makes games fun and what motivates people, what drives people to try and achieve certain goals. So that's again more or less the same in serious game design as well, but because serious games usually involve domains that may be either not so common knowledge, they may be very focused on certain expertise area, and most of the game designers are not experts in all of these fields. So I would say that the main skill is, how would you call it, intellectual flexibility, that the game designer is able to speak the same language with the domain experts, that the game designer understands the concepts and is able to kind of turn the material into a game. So that requires kind of course general knowledge is good in that sense, and usually the inner curiosity towards the new material and the new domain, so that the game designer actually gets enthusiastic about the substance, so that the designer is able to turn that into a fun and engaging game. Yeah, I think there are as many processes as there are game designers, but usually to pick and choose some, usually it starts from the idea generation, that the team starts to toy around with the ideas, with the overall concepts, and that when that's kind of nailed down, the process goes into a concept design, that the people start making drafts of the kind of the visuals of the game, maybe the main plot of the game, something that best describes the essence of the game to be designed. And usually at that point the game designer starts writing down the game design document in order to kind of put things down and in order to convey the story for the rest of the team and possibly for the stakeholders, customers, or other parties involved in the design process. And when the game design is more or less put down, even in a draft version, usually the design process goes into practice at that point, and the designers and the team starts to prototype the idea, first doing kind of like maybe technical prototypes, maybe testing the core points of the idea, whether it's actually working in practice, because game design rarely is theoretical process that you just write down things and then you can make a perfect game, because usually even the best game design document rarely nails it down in a way that the end result will be fun and engaging game. So that's why the prototyping process is very critical, and it's at least I see that as part of the design process. So it's basically iterating the concept as long as possible, or as long as the people find out that, yeah, this actually works, this is fun, this is cool, and then you start following towards the end result and towards polishing the game. And I kind of think that the game design process goes from the day one to the final day, and it's kind of never ending. Yeah, I think that, again, all the aspects, all the areas that are in entertainment games are also in serious games, so they are more or less the same. But then again, when designing serious games, you need to adapt the material, the substance matter. If it's a learning game trying to help people to learn certain topic, you need to adapt that material into the format of the game. And usually the game designer also needs to think about the learning curve. If it's a learning game, you need to think that how the player will progress through the game in a way that he or she is able to gain as much knowledge as is currently possible for that stage of the game. So it's kind of also pedagogical process in learning games. But then if you do a simulation game where the end users try to, for example, find an optimized way of running certain industrial process, then of course the whole process needs to be understood within the game design so that it works well with the gameplay. And also I think if you design an entertainment game, one of the most important areas is that whether the game is fun to play. And I don't mean fun as a way that it's kind of like, yeah, funny game, but engaging game, motivating game which is addictive enough so that the players are eager to play it more. So those are the things for entertainment games, and hopefully those are things for serious games as well. But in addition to those, the designer may need to think about the impact of the game. So whether the game actually conveys the message it needs to convey. So if the message is lost somewhere during the process, then the serious part of the game is not really worthwhile, because it goes away. And possibly in some serious games also the authenticity of the material, so that if the game tries to describe certain domain, you need to make sure that all the material that's within the game, it's following the guidelines from the expert. I think first of all, if talking about game design in a sense, so not that much in the final testing, but in the design phase, of course the user demographics are important, so that the designer needs to be sure that he or she knows who is the target audience. And that's usually very difficult to understand unless you kind of talk with the users. And in one way or the other, you need to figure out what are the users, what do they like, what do they hate, what are their personal kind of interests, so that you can design the game for that certain target group. And in terms of serious games, usually the users represent more or less people that are within the domain of the serious game, so that kind of adds a new challenge for the designer, so that the designer needs to go into that domain area and try and understand what's actually going on. And for example, our serious game design process in Ludocraft usually involves ethnographical part in the beginning phase of the production, so that before we even start the design, we have a team from the developers who, for example, if we do game about Southern Africa climate, so possibly our team goes over there and spends there 1 or 2 weeks kind of mingling with the locals, gathering information and also gathering the first-hand feel of the environment so that they can kind of capture that and design that into the game. So that's kind of the heavy part and usually very expensive part, but at least in my opinion it usually provides excellent results so that the team understands what is the world the game tries to portray. Yeah, I think most of the time people think that game design documents are just waste of paper and time, that the designer drafts the document in the early stages of the project and then everybody forgets about it, and that usually happens if the documentation is not living and up to date. So basically it's an iterative process as well, so that the documentation needs to be updated every time a new decision is made in terms of the design. So, and documentation itself, I rarely over document anything because I'd like to have the team to have as much autonomy in that kind of details and how do they want to implement things, so that I don't see it very effective to write down a 100-page game design document. So usually we keep it very simple, like for example 2 to 10 pages, maybe adding with illustrative part with pictures, images, drawings and stuff like that. And the format or structure, it's kind of, I think, more or less the same in every game design document. Maybe different aspects are highlighted and maybe some aspects are left out because the designer thinks that they are not kind of applicable for the project. So usually the document describes the premise of the game, so what is the background, why the game is worthwhile to be made, what are the specifications or criteria if it's a serious game, so what does the customer needs in the game. Maybe the target audience is described at this point so that all the members of the development team understands that who will be the target player, so that they can kind of try and relate their decisions towards that. Also the game world, how does the game world behave, what's in it, what kind of elements are involved, what kind of ambience is there, what is the kind of the feel of the game, rules and mechanics of the game, usually at least to a certain level, maybe the look and feel, like what kind of feelings, emotions the game is trying to evoke. If it's a level-based games, it's usually description of each of the levels and what's included in there. Of course, the main objective for the player, what is the goal of the player and what are the challenges the player is going to face while trying to reach the objective. Maybe the format of the game, whether it's a card game, board game, mobile game, desktop game, role-playing game, and also the target platform, whether it's mobiles, PCs, what kind of technologies are used and the kind of rationale behind the technological choices. And maybe certain aspects of the marketing, so that it's usually already at this point that the game designer also thinks that what will be the target market, what are the channels where the game is going to be distributed in, and maybe the price point of the game, maybe even some budgeting frameworks, because usually the budget very strictly kind of defines what kind of features can be implemented in the game and what is the kind of desired quality level of the game. So whether it's a AAA production with 100 million euro budget, or whether it's just something that tries to achieve the purpose with less money. Yeah, it's a difficult question. I totally agree that games are also a form of art, form of interactive art, and they have all the features that usually are associated with other art as well. And of course, serious games could be seen as a form of art as well. But I think that serious games are more as a tool, because usually the reason for developing a serious game is that people try to solve a problem, or they try to satisfy certain needs or something. So usually that's more kind of tool specific interest than just kind of art specific. Maybe you can argue that even the art has the utilitarian value, that it can also be seen as a tool. Maybe the art satisfied the need for aesthetics, or maybe the art is created in order to raise some feelings, bring in some emotions or things like that. So it's a very vague line, and I don't know whether it's even needed to try and define whether they are art form or not. But usually when I think about serious games, it's kind of tool or set of tools that comes to mind. Gameplay also, of course, in any game, it's kind of the engine that drives the game, and the engine that tries and makes the player to feel motivated, to kind of feel also rewarded when the player is successful. So in a sense, without gameplay there is no game. So that's of course very important. In serious games, like one of these other points as well, the role of the gameplay is of course to fulfill the purpose of the serious game. So usually when designing the gameplay for serious games, it's not enough to target for the fun and engagement, but you also need to target for the purpose of actually achieving the purpose of the serious game. So if it's a learning game, the gameplay needs to support the learning process as well. So it's not just enough to have fun and engaging game, but it needs to kind of tie it all together. And I think maybe the problem still today with serious games is that the resources to design and develop a serious game, they usually are very limited. So I think that is one of the reasons why many serious games are seen as kind of pathetic games, very lousy attempts to achieve something which is more or less game-like, but not necessarily game in a sense that the players would get excited about playing a serious game. And I don't think that there's lack of knowledge or skills from the parts of game designers and game developers, but it's more or less the issue of budget, so that when there's less money to develop the game, there's usually less time to think and iterate and try and find the key point of the game. But gameplay is very important, and hopefully even in serious games project in the future we can see totally kick-ass serious games that people also would like to play just for fun. It is very important, and I think that there are many common things between entertainment games and serious games in terms of good user experience, like the engagement, whether the game is engaging or not, whether the user actually feels that it is very kind of, you can get into the flow, you can really immerse yourself into the world of the game. So that's very similar both of the worlds. I would still argue that even serious games need to be fun to play with, because if they are not fun to play with, you can kind of start thinking whether they are games at all, because it's just kind of, maybe it's a interactive medium that tries to do something, but if it's not fun, it may be that the game fails in terms of the playability. Excitement, I would say, is very important for the player experience, that the game is designed and built in a way that it really can excite the player, that the player can feel excitement and maybe get some surprises, raise the curiosity, and in that sense get the inner motivation to play more, to try again, to go further into the game. First of all, I thought that the learning part is something that's very specific for the serious games, but whatever entertainment games you're thinking about, there's always learning involved, so that the player is actually learning to play the game, learning new skills, at least how to play that certain game. But in the serious games, I think the learning of the substance matter, whatever the game is about, that is very important aspect, because the tool is not working if that is not conveyed to the player. But it could be also used as kind of improvement to the user experience, because there are many people who really thrive to learn more, and they are interested in kind of crossing the boundary of their knowledge and skills, and there are people who really get excited when they realize that, hey, I didn't know this before, but now I know how this works, and I can kind of improve my point of view, and I can increase my level of skills. But then again, I think again the same applies for entertainment games and serious games, is the kind of the three motivational factors, or the factors that drive usually every people, is the kind of the purpose, that the player feels that the thing he or she does is purposeful, that there's some purpose doing. The purpose can be just having fun, the purpose can be spending time with interesting topic, or the purpose could be learning a new skill or whatever. But the player needs to feel that he or she finds purpose in the game. And then second is the mastery, that the game is designed in a way that the perceived skill level is increasing all the time, that the player feels that he or she is actually developing in the game, and can feel that, hey, I know how to play this game. Maybe not quite enough, but almost, and I know that if I push further, I will learn more and I will be better in playing this game. And in terms of serious games, it would be nice that the player feels that, yeah, I'm also improving my skills in this substance matter, in this domain of the serious game. And then the final part, the autonomy, that the player has kind of power to choose when to play, how to play, what to play, with whom to play, what kind of method to use in the playing. So those are usually the things that very heavily affect the motivation of a person to do whatever. It applies to all areas of life, but usually in games these are very easily implemented, because games are not actually real world, so you can define the rules, you can create the game to follow the certain paths, and you can let the player pick and choose his or her personal kind of favorite steps to take. That kind of depends how you define gamification, but basically gamification or gamifying or game-like design or playful design or playful methods. This philosophy and the playfulness in general has been core values in Ludocraft since founding of the company, or actually since the early research years when we were a research unit at the University of Oulu. And we've been doing these things since year 2000 or something. So basically there are usually every now and then somebody coins a new term or concept, like gamification, for example. There were no gamification when we started because that term was not invented yet at that time. But basically, if you think gamification as a broader concept that tries to take maybe a model or phenomenon or substance matter and tries to change that in a way that there are some game-like features, there are some game-like elements in it. So if you talk about that when you talk about gamification, so that's been the core essence of Ludocraft since the beginning. And basically how we see gamification is that all the people are homo ludens, the playful human beings, and in a sense the whole life can be seen as a game. And when you start seeing your environment as a game, you evidently, and following certain steps and learning more, you start kind of implementing game-like features to your everyday life. And that's kind of the overall philosophy of our company. And then we try to apply that for our games and the games we develop for our customers. So in a way, I hope that people would go from narrow gamification to this broader life is a game attitude, and that people would be able to see that we all play. Every human being is a playful human being, and it's not just the children who play and learn, it's also the adults, and even adults have lots of games and play that they don't even think as games or play, but they still do these. Like, for example, all the rituals we do even in this country, all the weddings, funerals, everything, it's all play, and it's all playful, and in a way it's also kind of like serious play because there's purpose for that play. It's not just waste of time, it's not just having fun, but there are certain specific purposes for these plays, rituals, that there's a need for them. And in a sense I would say that every person on this planet is kind of like serious games designer, but people just don't know it yet. And that's kind of one way of trying to convey that message and teach people that you all are experts in designing play and even designing games, because games are just kind of like the children of play. If you add some rules, some conflicts, maybe some points, some rewards, then you very easily turn a play into a game.